Okay. Thank you so much, Colonel Bowe. Charles Atkeison, Examiner.com, SpaceOnShoes.com. First, I want to ask you about your childhood here in Atlanta. Education, sports were strong focuses for you. Do you feel the two became interwoven as you grew up and matured?
Yeah, absolutely. I think all aspects of life are interwoven. You can see parts of life in everything that you do, and it's one of the ways when I'm growing up I tried to pick different things, and it's amazing how life is connected. And you've probably seen some of the shows like Connections is one I can think of, on a PBS show where they take different things that seem totally unrelated and actually bring them together, and that's kind of how I think life is. And so yes, I think sports, how you operate as a team. I mean, you think of how a sports team is. Well, when you look at it, the team when we're in space, you see astronauts, but we're talking on the radios to a whole team on the ground, and then they have other teams that are working for the control center, and then there are other teams that are making things. So all these things that you learn in sports, a lot of the how to be a winning team, those same skills of dedication, determination when things don't go right, being able to get yourself out there, not give up, and press back forward. Those are the same type of skills that you have when you're working out in space. You have some challenge out there and you got to get through, and it is amazing to see the dedication and the teamwork that it takes for people to get the job done.
Now you're back from your second space flight. Share with me how the loss of Tim Cooper from your crew and the continued external tank cracks affected how you and your crew trained in those last months.
Well, talking about Tim, it was very unfortunate. He had a bike accident and broke his hip, and we were so close to flight that he wouldn't have enough time to recover by the time we needed to fly the mission. And, I can't say enough great things about Tim. His work that got our spacewalks ready, the things that, a great friend and a great comrade making these things happen. The challenge, Tim actually, again, getting back to the team thing that we were talking about, I can't think of a better team player. He actually designed those EVAs. So when Steve Bowen, who was his replacement, came in, and he actually flew on me on my first flight, Steve did, came on board. His task, because he didn't have enough time to train all the things that Tim had trained in, but we needed someone to do that, the two spacewalks we were doing. So Tim and Steve actually worked hand in hand, working together to go out the door. And Tim, I don't know if you've seen the pictures, but he was actually in mission control at the time with this thing, and so I can't think of a better. Obviously Tim wishes he was there and had the opportunity to do it, but still was there supporting us and supporting the team, getting the job done when we're out there playing the game. So very impressed with Tim.
Now, moments before boarding Discovery, all of us smiled during your crew huddle there at the base of the launch pad, just hours before liftoff. What were your thoughts? Can you share your feelings and maybe a comment or two that was said?
Basically we were just having a huddle as a team. We just said a quick prayer and just said, looking forward to the mission and, to let us do well. And, it's a good way to get ready for the mission and kind of give us some focus just before we get on the rocket to go.
Well, as you went up and during the shuttle launch, talk about what the pilot's doing during the ascent.
The pilot is basically operating all the major systems that are on the shuttle that have to do the main engines. I have the switches for shutting down the engines, starting the engines. Any type of leaks or other things. Those are, of course, I monitor the systems for the main engines as they're going uphill. I also run the electrical switches, all the electrical power switches that we have on one side. The auxiliary power units right now, Endeavor's waiting you off the pad. You've probably heard a little bit about the APU. We have a heater string on APU-1, and if we would have launched with that problem, we would have been A-OK. But since we have the opportunity to fix it on the ground, it makes sense to do it because now we have more redundancy once we get to orbit. So auxiliary power units we use, and the auxiliary power units, the APUs as we call them, actually provide all the power, the hydraulic power to basically move the main engine bells on ascent. We actually move the flight control surfaces to do what we call load relief, but as you're going through the atmosphere, because there's air flying, the wings of the shuttle are obviously producing lift and doing those things, we actually need to, because of the wind forces that are blowing on it, we actually move the flight control surfaces as we're going uphill. Again, a whole team had to figure out that to get the correct program to make sure that works. And for landing, we use the APUs for putting the landing gear down and the nose wheels, and so a lot of things that the APUs do in an important system. And then also above the pilot, we have the OMS, which is the orbital maneuvering system. There's two big engines, not the three that you normally see that light off when we go, but there's two other big ones. If you look, they're not quite as big as those three main ones, but those are called the OMS. And then we also have we have 44 of these smaller jets that we call reaction control system or RCS jets. So the reaction control system primarily does pitches and small translations, and these ohms are for bigger burns once we get up to orbit. So on ascent, we actually do an ohms dump, and on this shuttle flight, we call it an ohms assist is what the official name of it is, and it actually allows us to carry more weight to orbit by doing this assist on the way up to. So the ohms are actually going as we're going up into orbit.
That's neat. Now, share with me, once you arrived on station, share with me your feelings about the cupola module node. I'm a big fan of the cupola. You have a 360-degree field of space. Is it a man cave? How would you describe it?
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. It's an awesome facility to see. It's the 360-degree view. You can't say enough good things about it. It's a great way to view it. And one of the things that we really like that I like to emphasize is that one of the things that really helps us do is we do a lot of robotics and spacewalks, and we can set it up so that we can't see it through a window. But there's nothing better. Imagine if I said go out and drive your car, but we'll give you computer screens to look at video cameras that you can get it done. You can train for it and you can do it. But we all know that it's significantly easier to drive looking out the windows, right? And so one of the things that great view gives us is the ability to move these arms around and grab things. And then a secondary benefit of that is when you have some free time, or we actually have a gym there that's right below it. We call it A-Red, where you can lift weights. And when no one's in front of you, you can actually work out and be looking out and seeing the planet. And, of course, the planet is when we have free time as astronauts, guess what we're doing? We're looking out the window like kids in a candy shop, trying to soak up every second because it's such an amazing view. And, the Earth is breathtaking, and just everything you see out the window is awe-inspiring. You go into the night sky and you can see lightning flashes. Almost always there's a thunderstorm somewhere in the night sky, and then you can look up and see the star field. It's just amazing views that you can get.
That is neat. What kind of music did you bring on board? Did you have your own personal player? What types of music?
Yeah, each crew member is allowed to bring their own music. I just brought out a wide selection. I have a whole bunch of varied songs, and I guess I probably grew up in the 80s, so I have a lot of 80s kind of rock kind of stuff, but I have some newer stuff as well, and just kind of a wide variety of different musics, and it's very nice. At the end of the day, you get a little bit of wind down time as you're getting ready to go to sleep, so a lot of people, as they're winding down in their sleeping bag, getting ready to go to sleep, usually put their earphones in, listen to a little music to give them a little inspiration, motivation, and it also kind of good chance to calm down just because you've been busy all day, concentrating on the mission, chance to wind down and ready to go to sleep.
Now, after undocking from space station, you flew Discovery. You had your chance to fly Discovery around the outpost before heading home. What was on your mind as you navigate what I call the white dove on the ocean of space there?
I haven't heard that term, the white dove. That's a good, well put. But the ship is amazingly big. We were actually, when we were docked, probably the biggest the space station is going to be in the near future, because we had the space shuttle up there, and we had the ATV, automated transfer vehicle, a European vehicle. We had the Japanese HTV, which we reached out and grappled with and put on top. So again, these are two very big vehicles on board. So volume, and we just attached the last module that's going on the space station in the near future. And then we also had the Russian vehicles. We had two Soyuzes for the space station crew on board, as well as a Progress. So if you think about it, we had European Space Agency, we had the Russians, and we had the Japanese, and we had the United States. 4 different vehicles. It's a first that's ever happened, and the volume and the weight of the station is going to be the biggest for the foreseeable future. So pretty neat. And as we're flying around, we actually take the vehicle out, and we undock, and Discovery flies. I mean, just a dream. She's a dream ship, a dream machine. That's the way I like to say, and flies very well, very responsive when you put in the controls. And one thing you can't really reproduce on the ground very well is just the boom of when those reaction control systems, when you put them. It's just such a deep bass. If you like music and you like the sound of the bass sound, it's just such a and you really can't capture it with audio. It's just a feeling, basically, as it goes off. And it's nice when you put in an input, you can feel the response, and you can look out the window and see as she reacts. And then, the team, us as well as the mission control, we're all, looking at the vehicle, admiring the view, and we have the beautiful Earth underneath us.
Okay, now are you ready for Georgia Tech football? You're a graduate of Georgia Tech.
I am.
Tell me a little bit about the great story on your first shuttle flight, flying over Atlanta at night, I believe.
Right.
It was a game on ESPN,
right.
and Tech was playing.
Yeah, it was great. You know, a lot of it, when we did the pass, I was looking down at Atlanta, so it's kind of cool to think that when you're looking down at the pass, and then people sent me pictures, and they actually said that they were talking about it as we were flying over top, so they knew about the pass, and that there was a discussion about it on ESPN. So to me, that's kind of a cool thing. Again, the interwoven that we were talking about at the beginning of the story. It's to me,
sports
it's coming back, and it's a very cool thing. And obviously, I'm a fan of Georgia Tech. Haven't got my master's degree there, so it's a great team.
Okay, now going forward, what does Colonel Eric Bowe's future look like? Will you stay with NASA? Are you looking for vying for an expedition mission aboard the space station?
You know, I'm looking. You know, every time you fly a spaceflight, you look around and you think about what do you want to do next. And right now, I'm definitely leaning towards. I'm taking Russian, and so I'm leaning towards. I'd love to do an expedition flight, get to try the opportunity. Obviously, you have to get selected to do that, and there's obviously training to do and those kind of things. But if I'm lucky enough, I would like to get the opportunity to fly on an expedition and do a long duration space flight, go up on a Russian Soyuz. For me, as a military pilot, I was trained back in the Cold War days, so it's kind of interesting to go from when we're enemies, you know, and now we're working together as friends and coworkers on up in space. So, and if I'm really lucky, there's new vehicles that are coming up to replace the space shuttle, and we're looking to go beyond low Earth orbit, and that's one of the reasons the space shuttle is being retired, is because to get these new vehicles, because the space shuttle was limited, it can only go to about 300 miles above the planet, and the moon is 250,000 miles, and when we want to go out to Mars and beyond, those are millions of miles away. So these new vehicles that we're starting to build, there's several companies that are working on it. NASA's partnering with those companies, so hopefully in the next 3 to 5 years we'll have another spacecraft that's ready to go up to the space station and then go beyond that. And if I'm lucky enough, super lucky, I'd love to have the opportunity to test fly. Test pilot is my background. And again, I love aviation and love everything about flying. I'd love to have the opportunity to do that if I was lucky enough to get chosen for it.
Well, that brings me to my final question, Colonel Bowe. Does the astronaut corps, are you following how SpaceX is proceeding with the Dragon spacecraft? And would you, if given the chance, maybe go aboard the Dragon if NASA, you know, wants to?
We have a whole bunch of different companies, and you know, actually NASA just released to 4 different companies, and they're all working at, you know, obviously the more the merrier is the way I look at it as an astronaut. The more, to me, when we're the most successful as an astronaut is when space travel is accessible by everyone, and then NASA can focus on, you know, going even farther beyond and keep pressing the bounds of where we're going. So I'd like to see what happened with aviation back in the day. You know, aviation really took off between World War I and World War II, and that's because someone says, hey, we need to move this piece of mail from point A to point B, and then people said, well, I want it in the weather, I want it at night, so now you had to have more runways, you got to have instruments, and all those things really advanced the airplane. Well, same thing with space. You know, the commercialization of space is you know, all these different companies are kind of at that point, and we can see there's interest in just doing you know, visiting space, you know, getting the opportunity to go up suborbital and look at things. There's people that want to do it, and there'll be other things that people want to do as we continue on. There's all kinds of different things, and someday I have no doubt that we'll have people living on the moon and people going to Mars, and you'll be like you are at the airport. When I flew out here to Atlanta after my trip, it's always fun to look at people, and they get on airplanes and they don't really think about it. They just, you know, they're looking at their watch. I'm going to get there. Oops, we're going to get on, get off. But it's only been 100 years since we even had the first airplanes flying, and here we are. Now we're using them like there's nothing to them. Same with the technology that you're recording me on a small computer sitting in front of me, and it's amazing to me. You know, we take these things for granted once you have them, and someday we'll be flying to the moon, and people, you mean there was a time we didn't go to the moon? And I see those days coming. So long way around to answer your question, I'd love to fly on, you know, SpaceX and all the other companies that are competing out there. We have astronauts actually going out to all these different companies and working with them to help them and then get inputs and, you know, working back and forth. So it's a team effort working together with all these different companies. And whatever company, you know, NASA finally actually, you know, partners up, and a good chance there'll be more than one. Be more than happy to whichever one of those companies it is to go fly in their new vehicle, and they'll probably have their own astronauts that actually fly the vehicle. We'll probably have our own astronauts, and it'll be some kind of, you know, working together to try to get that vehicle tested and flown, and maybe we'll have separate NASA flights, or maybe we'll work together. These are really great questions. These are things that remain for the future, but it's very exciting that we have the chance, and that we have all these companies that are working on it to have the opportunity to go do it.
Interwoven.
Coming
together.
Well done.
on the threshold of the future. So, Colonel Bowe, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
You bet.
Thank you.
Quite welcome.